The belt cracked through the night air like a whip. Lena Hart pressed her back against the cold alley wall and knew with terrible certainty that this time, Burke Russell would kill her. Welcome to a story of courage, danger, and a love forged in fire. Stay with me until the very end and comment what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. Now let me take you back to that fateful summer night in 1878. The summer heat came to Colorado territory like a fever, hot, relentless, dangerous. The kind of heat that made men's tempers shorter and their vices longer. In the rough mining town of Copper Ridge, where the mountains met the prairie and civilization barely held on by its fingernails, the saloons did better business than the churches. And a woman alone was prey. Lena Hart had learned that lesson the hardest way possible. She was 21 years old. Her dark blonde hair had come loose from its pins, hanging in wild tangles around her face. The blue cotton dress she wore, the same one she had carefully mended just last week, was torn at the shoulder. Blood trickled from where she had scraped her arm climbing out the saloon window. Behind her, she could hear chaos erupting from the Lucky Chance saloon, her stepfather's pride and shame. The place where he had tried to auction her off like a prize mare to the highest bidder. Burke Russell's voice boomed through the darkness, slurred but furious. "Lena, you ungrateful little witch, get back here!" She ran. Her worn boots slapped against the hard-packed dirt as she fled. The moon hung fat and yellow overhead. Just enough light to see by. Just enough light to be seen. For 3 years, Burke had beaten her. For 3 years, he had told her she was worthless. Tonight, he had tried to sell her to Malcolm Crenshaw, a cattle baron with cold eyes and a reputation for cruelty. When Lena refused, when she spat in Crenshaw's face and ran, Burke's rage became murderous. The alley opened onto a side street. For one brief moment, Lena thought she might make it. She could see the edge of town ahead, the darkness of the open prairie beyond. Then Burke stepped out of the shadows directly in front of her. "Going somewhere, stepdaughter." Her blood turned to ice. He must have known she would run this way. Must have circled around while she fled blindly through the darkness. He was a big man, 6 feet tall and broad across the shoulders. His face was flushed red from whiskey, but it was his eyes that terrified her most. Cold, calculating, empty of anything resembling human kindness. In his right hand he held his belt. The thick leather was coiled like a snake. The brass buckle caught the moonlight. Lena whispered through her tears, "Please, Burke, just let me go. I will not tell anyone. You will never have to see me again." Burke laughed, that ugly, bitter sound she knew too well. "Let you go? After you embarrassed me in front of half the territory?" He took a step closer. Lena backed up. Her shoulders hit the wall behind her. "I raised you," Burke snarled. "Fed you. Kept a roof over your worthless head after your mama died. And this is how you repay me. You did not raise me." Lena's voice shook but remained defiant. "You tolerated me, and mama would be ashamed of what you have become." The words were out before she could stop them. She saw the rage flash across Burke's face like lightning. He raised the belt high. Lena threw her arms up to protect her face. She knew it would not be enough. She knew this time he would not stop until she was broken beyond repair. Then a voice came from the deeper shadows at the far end of the alley. "That's far enough." The voice was quiet, almost conversational, but it carried a weight that made even Burke Russell pause mid-swing. The kind of voice that did not need to shout to be heard, did not need to threaten to be dangerous. Burke turned slowly. "This ain't your concern, stranger. This is family business." "Family?" The word was repeated with cold disgust. "That is what you call beating a terrified girl in an alley? Where I come from, we call that something else entirely." A man stepped forward into the moonlight. Lena's breath caught. He was tall, maybe an inch or two taller than Burke, but leaner, built like a man who had spent his life in the saddle. He wore dark trousers and a plain work shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows. A worn hat shadowed his face. But what captured Lena's attention was the revolver hanging low on his right hip, and the absolute stillness with which he stood, like a coiled spring waiting to be released. Burke's voice held something new now. Wariness, maybe even fear. "Cole Warwick, should have known you would stick your nose where it does not belong." So the stranger had a name. Stranger, Cole Warwick. Cole moved closer. His steps were measured and careful. Lena could see his face now, hard angles and weathered skin, somewhere in his early 30s, with eyes that were pale even in the moonlight, gray like storm clouds. Miss, Cole spoke directly to her. Are you hurt? Lena opened her mouth, but no words came out. She nodded, then shook her head, then nodded again. She is coming back with me, Burke snapped. We had an arrangement. You had an arrangement to sell her like she was a horse at auction. Cole's voice grew harder. I was there, Russell. I saw the whole thing. So no, she is not going anywhere with you. The silence stretched thick and dangerous. Finally, Burke lowered the belt. This ain't over, Warwick. Cole's hand drifted closer to his revolver. Yes, it is. Burke's jaw worked like he was chewing on words too bitter to swallow. Then he turned and stalked past Lena without looking at her. His shoulder deliberately brushed hers to make her stumble. She watched him disappear into the darkness. And only when he was completely gone did Lena let herself slide down the wall. Her legs gave out. She sat in the dirt and started to shake. A stranger had just saved her life, and everything was about to change. Cole Warwick crouched a few feet away from Lena, close enough to speak quietly, far enough not to feel threatening. Are you hurt? He asked again. His voice was gentler now. He hit you? Lena shook her head, then realized that was not entirely true. My arm. When I climbed out the window. It is just a scrape. Cole nodded slowly. What about before tonight? He hit you before? She did not answer, but her silence was answer enough. You got somewhere to go? Cole asked. Family? Friends? Lena almost laughed, but it came out as something closer to a sob. No, no one. My mother has been dead 3 years. And Burke. She trailed off, gesturing vaguely toward where her stepfather had disappeared. He is all I had left. Not all. Cole stood and held out his hand. I've got a ranch about 5 miles north of town. Small operation. Me and my housekeeper, Mrs. Avery, and a couple of ranch hands. The foreman cabin is empty. Has been for months. It is not much, but it has got 4 walls, a roof, and a door that locks from the inside. Lena stared at his outstretched hand. Her mind struggled to process what he was offering. You want me to come work for you? I am offering you a safe place to sleep tonight, Cole corrected. What happens after that is up to you. But you cannot stay here. Burke Russell's pride is hurt, and wounded pride makes men stupid. He was right. Lena knew it. But accepting help from a stranger went against every instinct her mother had tried to drill into her. Trust no one. Rely on yourself. Men only want one thing. But then again, her mother had trusted Burke Russell. And look where that had led. Why? Lena whispered. Why would you help me? You do not know me. Cole was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was soft, almost hesitant. Because someone should have helped you a long time ago. And because I know what it is like to have nowhere to go and no one to turn to. I swore a long time ago that if I ever had the chance to be the person I needed back then, I would be. The words were simple, honest. They cut through Lena's defenses like a knife through butter. She took his hand. His palm was calloused and warm. His grip was firm but careful as he pulled her to her feet. For a moment they stood there in the moonlit alley, her hand still in his. And Lena felt something shift inside her chest. Not attraction, not exactly, but something quieter, safer, hope. After so long without it, she had almost forgotten what it felt like. She said quietly, "Thank you, Mr. Warwick." Cole. He released her hand and stepped back. Just Cole, and you are welcome. Lena. She wrapped her arms around herself. Just Lena. Cole nodded toward the street. My horse is tied up in front of the general store. We will ride out before your stepfather decides to come back with friends. Can you ride? Lena nodded. She had learned young, back when her mother was still alive and they had had a small farm outside Kansas City. It felt like a lifetime ago. They made their way through the quiet streets of Copper Ridge, staying in the shadows, avoiding the pools of light from saloon windows. Cole's horse was a big bay gelding with kind eyes. Cole mounted first, then reached down to pull Lena up behind him. She hesitated for just a moment. This was it, the point of no return. But then she thought of Burke's belt, Burke's cold eyes, Burke's promise that she was worthless. She took Cole's hand and let him pull her up. The horse moved out at a steady walk. Lena held onto Cole's waist awkwardly at first, but as they left the lights of Copper Ridge behind, she found herself leaning closer, taking comfort in his solid presence. "You will be safe," Cole said quietly. "I promise you that, Lena. Whatever else happens, you will be safe." And despite everything, despite all the reasons she had not to trust, Lena found herself believing him. The ride took longer than she expected. Cole kept the horse to a careful pace, mindful of the uneven ground and darkness. Every shadow looked like Burke Russell. Every distant sound was his voice calling her name. "Almost there," Cole said after what felt like hours. "Just over this next rise." They crested a small hill. Lena saw lights in the distance, warm yellow lamplight spilling from windows, welcoming and safe. As they drew closer, she could make out the shapes of buildings, a ranch house, a barn, several smaller outbuildings, and a cabin set slightly apart from the rest. Cole guided the horse toward the main house where an older woman appeared on the porch. A lamp held high. She was stocky and gray-haired, wearing a practical cotton dress. "Lord above, Cole." The woman hurried down the steps. "What happened?" "Mrs. Avery, this is Lena Hart." Cole's voice remained calm. "She has had some trouble in town. She will be staying in the foreman cabin for a while." Mrs. Avery's sharp eyes took in Lena's torn dress and disheveled hair. But instead of judgment, the older woman's expression softened into something maternal and fierce. "Of course, come inside, dear. Let me get you cleaned up and fed." Mrs. Avery led Lena into warmth and light and the smell of bread and coffee, into a place that felt more like home than anywhere she had been in 3 long years. And as Mrs. Avery cleaned and bandaged her scraped arm, as Cole stood silent guard by the door, Lena felt something she had not felt in longer than she could remember. Safe. For the first time in 3 years, Lena Hart felt safe. Later, as Mrs. Avery led her to the small cabin that would be hers, Lena finally let herself cry. She cried for her mother, for the girl she had been before, for all the nights she had spent afraid. And then, when the tears finally stopped, she lay down on the narrow bed and slept without nightmares for the first time in years. Outside, unbeknownst to Lena, Cole Warwick stood on his porch and watched the dark cabin. His hand rested on his revolver. His eyes scanned the darkness beyond the ranch. He had made a promise. And Cole Warwick never broke his promises. Morning sunlight came gentle through the cabin window. For a fleeting moment, Lena forgot where she was. Then memory returned in a rushing flood, and she sat bolt upright in bed. Her heart pounded. She half expected to find Burke standing over her with that belt raised high, but there was only silence. Clean, peaceful silence. She exhaled slowly, pressed a hand to her chest, willed her racing heart to calm. The cabin around her was exactly as it had been when she had fallen asleep. Small but tidy, rough-hewn walls, a simple table and chair, a washstand with a chipped basin. Morning light streamed through the single window, catching dust motes in its beams. Real. This was real. She was still here, still safe, still free. A soft knock at the door made her jump. "Miss Hart?" Mrs. Avery's voice was gentle. "Are you awake, dear?" Lena crossed to the door and opened it. The older woman stood on the small porch with a bundle of fabric in her arms and a kindly smile on her weathered face. "Good morning. I thought you might appreciate some fresh clothes. These belonged to Cole's late wife. She was about your size." The words hung in the air. Late wife, so Cole Warwick had been married, was widowed now. That explained something about the sadness Lena had glimpsed in his eyes. "I could not possibly," Lena started, but Mrs. Avery was already pressing the bundle into her hands. "Nonsense. They are just sitting in trunks gathering dust." And Sarah, that was her name, she would have wanted someone to get use from them. She was a practical woman. Mrs. Avery's smile turned wistful. "She would have liked you, I think." Lena's throat tightened. "Thank you. For everything. Come up to the house when you are dressed," Mrs. Avery said. "I have got flapjacks and bacon keeping warm. And Cole is eager to talk to you about work." Work. The word sent a small thrill through Lena's chest. Work meant purpose, meant earning her keep, meant not being a burden. After Mrs. Avery left, Lena unfolded the bundle of clothes carefully. There were 2 simple cotton dresses, one a faded blue, the other a practical brown, along with undergarments, soft stockings, and even a worn but serviceable pair of boots. Sarah Warwick, a woman she had never met, never would meet, but whose clothes now rested against Lena's skin, whose husband had saved her life. 20 minutes later, washed and dressed with her hair braided neatly down her back, Lena made her way toward the main house. In the daylight, she could see the ranch properly for the first time. It was modest but well-maintained. The house was a simple two-story structure with a wide porch. The barn was sturdy. The corrals were in good repair. Beyond the main buildings, cattle grazed on rolling grassland that stretched toward distant mountains, their peaks still capped with snow despite the summer heat. It was beautiful, peaceful. Nothing like the cramped, smoky rooms above the Lucky Chance where she had spent the last 3 years. Cole was standing near the barn, deep in conversation with a younger man. Both men looked up as Lena approached. She saw Cole's expression shift slightly. Something passed across his face too quickly to name before it was replaced by careful neutrality. Miss Hart. He touched the brim of his hat. You look rested. Thank you, Mr. Warwick. And thank you for the clothes. Cole's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She would have wanted them used. No sense in letting good clothes go to waste. He turned to the young man beside him. This is Tommy Reeves, one of my hands. Tommy, this is Lena Hart. She will be helping Mrs. Avery around the house for a while. Tommy was maybe 19 or 20, with sandy hair and a friendly face that broke into an easy grin. Pleasure to meet you, Miss Hart. Welcome to the Warwick Ranch. Thank you. Lena managed a small smile. It felt strange, smiling. She had not had much reason to lately. Tommy, finish checking those fence posts on the south pasture, Cole said, and tell Jack I need to see him before noon. Yes, sir. Tommy tipped his hat to Lena and strode off toward the barn, whistling cheerfully. When they were alone, Cole turned his full attention to Lena. She felt the weight of his gaze. Not threatening, not invasive, but searching, careful. How are you feeling? Really? The question caught her off guard. Most people did not ask how she was really feeling. Most people did not care. Scared, she admitted, surprising herself with the honesty. Grateful. Confused. I keep expecting to wake up back in that room above the saloon and find out this was all a dream. Cole nodded slowly. It is not a dream. You are here, you are safe. And as long as you want to stay, you have got a place. He paused, then added more carefully. But I need to be straight with you about something. Burke Russell is not going to let this go quietly. He is going to tell anyone who will listen that I kidnapped you or seduced you or whatever other lies he comes up with. People in town are going to talk. Some of them might believe him. Lena had expected as much, but hearing it said aloud still made her stomach clench. I can tell them the truth. I can tell them what really happened. You can. Cole agreed. And you should if anyone asks. But some folks will not care. They will think what they want to think regardless. His expression hardened slightly. I will not lie to you, Lena. This might get ugly before it gets better. If you want to leave, if you want me to take you somewhere else, another town maybe where Burke does not have any influence, I will do that. No questions asked. The offer was genuine. Lena could see that. Cole Warwick would take her wherever she wanted to go, would help her start over somewhere new. And he would not expect anything in return. But running meant starting over with nothing, meant being alone again. At least here she had Mrs. Avery's kindness, a roof over her head, work to keep her hands busy. At least here she had Cole standing between her and Burke's rage. I would like to stay, Lena said quietly, if you will have me. I am a hard worker, Mr. Warwick. I can cook, clean, mend, tend a garden. I will earn my keep. Cole, he corrected gently, and I do not doubt you will earn your keep. Mrs. Avery has been running herself ragged trying to manage everything. She will be glad for the help. He glanced toward the house, then back to Lena. But I want you to understand something. You do not owe me anything. What happened last night stepping in with Burke? That was not a favor you need to repay. That was just the right thing to do. The simplicity of the statement made Lena's eyes sting with unexpected tears. Most men would not have done what you did, she said softly. Cole's expression darkened. Then most men are cowards. They walked to the house together. Lena found herself studying Cole from the corner of her eye. He moved with quiet confidence, economical in his gestures, speaking only when he had something worth saying. Everything about him suggested control, discipline, a man who had learned to keep his emotions locked down tight. But there were cracks in that armor. She had seen them last night in the alley, saw them now in the tension of his shoulders, the careful way he maintained distance between them as they walked. Mrs. Avery was waiting in the kitchen with flapjacks and bacon and fresh coffee. Lena ate carefully at first, but Mrs. Avery kept piling more food onto her plate with comments about girls needing meat on their bones. Eventually, Lena gave up trying to be polite and just ate. It was the best meal she had had in years. As they ate, Mrs. Avery outlined what Lena's days would look like, helping with breakfast and dinner preparations, cleaning the main house, tending the vegetable garden, doing laundry, mending clothes. The work sounded hard but honest, and Lena found herself actually looking forward to it. "We keep decent hours here," Mrs. Avery explained. "Breakfast at dawn, dinner at noon, supper at dusk. Sundays are for rest and church if you are inclined. Cole pays fair wages at the end of each month. Room and board plus $20. Lena nearly choked on her coffee. $20? That is too generous. That is what the work is worth, Cole said quietly from where he sat at the head of the table. And it is what I pay. There was no arguing with the finality in his tone, so Lena simply nodded, her mind spinning. $20 a month was more money than she had seen in years. It was freedom, independence, the ability to save up and maybe someday have choices about her own future. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of activity. Mrs. Avery showed Lena around the house. 6 rooms total, a parlor that looked rarely used, Cole's bedroom upstairs, a guest room, Mrs. Avery's room on the ground floor, and the large kitchen that seemed to be the heart of the home. She learned where the linens were kept, how Cole liked his coffee, black strong, no sugar, which vegetables were ready for harvest in the garden. She also learned, in bits and pieces throughout the day, about the ranch itself. Cole ran about 200 head of cattle on 1,000 acres, a modest operation by Colorado standards, but profitable enough. He had 3 men working for him, Tommy, whom she had already met, Jack Morrison, the oldest hand who had been with Cole for 5 years, and a quiet Mexican man named Rafael who handled the horses. "Cole is a good man," Mrs. Avery said that afternoon as they worked together in the garden, pulling weeds. "Quiet, keeps to himself, but fair and honest as the day is long. He has had a hard road, though, lost his parents young, built this ranch from nothing." She trailed off, shaking her head sadly. Lena waited, sensing there was more. "His wife Sarah died 3 years ago," Mrs. Avery continued softly. "Fever took her quick and cruel. They had only been married 4 years. Cole has not been the same since. Threw himself into the work. Stopped going to town except when necessary. Keeps everyone at arm's length." The older woman gave Lena a significant look. "Until last night, first time in 3 years he has brought someone home. First time he has stepped into someone else's trouble. Sarah would have been proud of him for that." The information settled over Lena like a heavy blanket. 3 years. Sarah had died 3 years ago, the same year Lena's mother had passed. Both of them grieving, both of them alone, both of them just trying to survive. That evening, Lena helped Mrs. Avery prepare supper, beef stew and fresh bread and apple pie. The ranch hands came in dusty and tired, washing up at the pump outside before filing into the kitchen. They were polite to Lena, curious but respectful, and if they wondered about the new woman at the ranch, they were smart enough not to ask questions in front of Cole. Cole himself said little during the meal, eating mechanically while Tommy chattered about fence posts and Jack complained about an ornery bull. But Lena caught him watching her once or twice, his expression unreadable. And each time their eyes met, he looked away quickly, as if caught doing something he should not. After supper, Lena insisted on doing the dishes. Through the kitchen window, she could see Cole on the porch, smoking a cigarette, staring out at the darkening prairie. "He does that every night," Mrs. Avery said quietly, coming to stand beside Lena. "Smokes 1 cigarette, watches the sun go down, then makes his rounds checking on the animals before bed. Creature of habit, our Cole. He saved my life last night," Lena said. "I do not know how to repay something like that." Mrs. Avery patted her arm gently. "You live well. You heal. You become the person you are meant to be instead of the person Burke Russell tried to make you. That is payment enough." Later, as Lena walked back to her cabin in the gathering dusk, she saw Cole still on the porch. He had finished his cigarette and was checking his revolver, working the cylinder with practiced ease. "Good night, Mr. Warwick," she called softly. He looked up. Even in the fading light, she could see the faint surprise on his face, as if he had not expected her to acknowledge him. "Good night, Lena. Sleep well. You too." But as Lena locked herself in her cabin and prepared for bed, she suspected neither of them would sleep particularly well. Cole would be out there keeping watch, making sure Burke did not come creeping around in the darkness, and she would be lying awake, trying to reconcile the fear still coiled tight in her chest with the tentative hope trying to take root alongside it. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that was both comforting and strange. Lena rose with the sun, helped Mrs. Avery prepare breakfast, cleaned the house, worked in the garden, prepared dinner, and fell into bed exhausted each night. The work was hard but honest, and for the first time in years, Lena felt like she was building something rather than just surviving. Cole kept his distance, polite but remote. He spoke to her mainly about practical matters, whether she needed anything from town, if the cabin was comfortable enough, how she was settling in. But sometimes Lena would catch him watching her with that same unreadable expression, and she would wonder what he was thinking, what he saw when he looked at her. On her fourth day at the ranch, Lena was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she heard horses approaching. Her hands stilled on the wet sheet she had been pinning. Her heart rate spiked with automatic fear. Burke. It had to be Burke coming to drag her back. But the voice that called out was not Burke's. "Well, Cole Warwick, you home?" Lena peered around the side of the house to see three men on horseback in the front yard. They looked official. One of them wore a sheriff's badge. Cole emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. "Sheriff Matthews, what brings you out this way?" The sheriff was a barrel-chested man with a gray mustache. He dismounted with a grunt. "Got a complaint filed in town. Burke Russell says you kidnapped his stepdaughter named of Lena Hart. Says you threatened him with a gun and stole the girl right out from under his nose." Lena's blood ran cold. "That is not how it happened," Cole said, his voice calm. "And you know Burke Russell well enough to know he is a liar when it suits him." "I know Burke has got his share of faults," the sheriff agreed, "but I have got to investigate complaints when they are filed. Where is the girl?" Before Cole could answer, Lena stepped around the house, her chin raised despite the fear coursing through her veins. "I am right here, Sheriff, and Mr. Warwick did not kidnap me. He saved me." The sheriff's eyes swept over her, taking in her simple dress, her bandaged arm, the defiant set of her shoulders. "That's so. Burke tells it different. Gent. Says you and him had a business arrangement you were trying to do back out of, and Warwick here interfered. Burke tried to sell me to Malcolm Crenshaw like I was cattle at auction." Lena's voice shook but remained clear. "When I refused, he chased me into an alley and tried to beat me with his belt. Mr. Warwick stopped him. Everything else is a lie." One of the men with the sheriff shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "Miss, are you saying Burke Russell attempted to assault you?" "I am saying he has been beating me for 3 years. And when I finally stood up to him, he tried to kill me." Lena felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. "Mr. Warwick offered me honest work and a safe place to stay." "That is not kidnapping. That is decency." The sheriff sighed heavily. "Miss Hart, I am going to need you to come into town and make an official statement. If what you are saying is true, then Burke needs to answer for it. But we have got to do this proper, through the law." "The law did not protect her before," Cole said quietly. There was an edge to his voice now, something dangerous. "Where was the law when Burke was beating her? Where was the law when he tried to sell her off, Cole?" The sheriff's tone was placating. "I understand you are upset, but you cannot take the law into your own hands." "I will go," Lena said quickly. "I will come to town and make a statement. I will tell everyone exactly what happened. But I am not going back to him. No matter what anyone says, I am not going back." The sheriff studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, come into town tomorrow morning. Bring Warwick with you if you want. We will get your statement written down official." After the sheriff and his men left, Lena found herself shaking so badly she had to sit down on the porch steps. Cole sat beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his solid presence. "You did good," he said quietly. Standing up to them like that took courage. I do not feel courageous, Lena admitted. I feel terrified. Courage is not about not being scared. It is about doing what needs doing even when you are scared half to death. Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he added, I will go into town with you tomorrow. You will not face this alone. Lena looked at him, really looked at him. At the hard planes of his face, the gray eyes that held so much carefully controlled emotion, the set of his jaw that suggested he would fight the whole town if necessary to keep her safe, and something shifted in her chest, something warm and dangerous and completely unexpected. Thank you, she whispered, for everything, for believing me, for standing with me. Cole met her gaze. For just a moment, his careful mask slipped. She saw pain there, and loneliness, and something else she could not quite name. You deserve someone standing with you, Lena. You deserve a hell of a lot more than what you have gotten. The next morning, they rode into Copper Ridge together. Cole on his bay gelding and Lena on a gentle mare named Daisy. The town looked different in daylight, smaller somehow, less threatening. But Lena's hands still trembled on the reins as they made their way down the main street toward the sheriff's office. People stared, some with curiosity, some with thinly veiled hostility. She heard whispers, saw curtains twitch in windows, felt the weight of judgment pressing down from all sides. Cole rode beside her, his posture relaxed but alert, his hand never far from his revolver. Ignore them, he said quietly. They do not matter. The sheriff was waiting, and true to his word, he took Lena's statement carefully and thoroughly, writing down every detail of Burke's abuse, the attempted sale to Malcolm Crenshaw, the chase through the alley, Cole's intervention. When she was done, her throat was raw, but she felt oddly lighter, as if speaking the truth aloud had lifted some of the weight she had been carrying. I will talk to Burke, Sheriff Matthews said, setting down his pen, and I will talk to the folks who were at the Lucky Chance that night. Get their accounts of what happened. If everything checks out the way I think it will, you will not have to worry about Burke Russell anymore. Lena wanted to believe him, but she had learned the hard way that wanting something did not make it true. They were walking back to their horses when Malcolm Crenshaw himself stepped out of the bank. He was perhaps 45 with slicked back hair and cold eyes, wearing an expensive suit, radiating the confidence of a man who had never been told no in his life. When he saw Lena, his face twisted into something ugly. Well, well, Crenshaw drawled loud enough for half the street to hear. If it is not the little whore who cost me $500. Tell me, sweetheart, was Warwick's bed worth running out on our arrangement? The words hit Lena like physical blows. She froze, her face burning with humiliation and rage, unable to form words, unable to move. But Cole moved. He closed the distance between himself and Crenshaw in 3 long strides. And before Lena fully registered what was happening, Cole's fist connected with Crenshaw's jaw with a sickening crack. The cattle baron went down hard, landing in the dust, blood streaming from his split lip. Get up, Cole said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Get up and apologize to the lady. Crenshaw struggled to his feet, his eyes blazing with fury. You son of a... Cole hit him again, harder this time, and Crenshaw went down like a sack of grain. A crowd was gathering now, people spilling out of shops and saloons to watch the spectacle. Lena saw the sheriff running toward them. I said apologize, Cole repeated, and there was something in his voice now that made the hair on Lena's arm stand up. Apologize for insulting her. Apologize for treating her like property. Apologize for being the kind of man who thinks he can buy a human being. Cole, the sheriff grabbed his arm. That is enough. Stand down before I have to arrest you. Cole looked at the sheriff, and whatever Matthews saw in his eyes made the older man take an involuntary step back. Then slowly, Cole released the tension in his shoulders and stepped away from Crenshaw. We are leaving, he said flatly, and if anyone insults or threatens Lena Hart again, I will not stop with just a split lip. That is not a threat, Sheriff. That is a promise. He turned and walked back to Lena, taking her arm gently and guiding her toward their horses. She went, numb with shock. Barely aware of mounting Daisy or leaving town, it was not until they were a mile outside Copper Ridge that she finally found her voice. You did not have to do that. Yes, I did. Cole did not look at her, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Men like Crenshaw think they can say whatever they want and there will not be consequences. Someone had to show him different. You could have been arrested. You could have, I do not care. Now he did look at her, and the intensity in his gray eyes stole her breath. I do not care what happens to me, Lena, but I will be damned if I stand by while someone degrades you. You have been through enough. You deserve better. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Neither was quite ready to acknowledge. Lena felt something crack open inside her chest, something that had been locked away for so long she had forgotten it was there. Why, she whispered, why do you care so much? Cole was silent for so long she thought he would not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion, barely contained. Because I know what it is like to lose someone you should have protected. I know what it feels like to fail the people who needed you most. And I swore I would never let that happen again. Never, Sarah. He was talking about Sarah, about whatever had happened 3 years ago when Fever took his wife. Lena wanted to ask, wanted to know the whole story. But the pain in Cole's voice stopped her. Some wounds were too fresh to probe. No matter how much time had passed, they rode the rest of the way in silence. But it was a different kind of silence now, charged with unspoken understanding, with shared grief, with the beginning of something neither of them had names for yet. That night, Lena lay awake in her cabin, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day in her mind, the sheriff's questions, Crenshaw's cruel words, Cole's fists, the promise in his voice. You deserve better. Did she? After everything she had endured, all the ways she had been broken down and made small, did she still deserve good things? Did she deserve kindness? Safety? Maybe even... She shut down that thought before it could fully form. It was too soon, too dangerous, too much. Cole Warwick had saved her life and given her shelter. But that did not mean he saw her as anything more than someone who needed help. The last thing she could afford was to mistake his decency for something it was not, to let her battered heart mistake protection for affection. But as she finally drifted towards sleep, Lena could not quite silence the small, stubborn voice in her head that whispered, what if it is something more? What if he feels it too? Outside, unaware of Lena's thoughts, Cole Warwick stood on his porch and smoked his nightly cigarette. His knuckles still ached from the satisfying impact with Crenshaw's jaw. He told himself he had done it purely out of principle, out of his responsibility to protect someone under his roof. He told himself the fury he had felt hearing Crenshaw insult Lena was nothing more than righteous anger. But deep in the honest part of his heart that he usually kept locked away, Cole knew the truth. He was starting to care about Lena Hart in ways that went beyond duty or protection. When he looked at her, he saw not just a victim who needed saving, but a brave, resilient woman who had survived hell and was still standing. He saw someone who understood loss and grief. He saw someone who made his too-quiet house feel a little less empty, and that terrified him more than any threat Burke Russell could make. Because caring meant risking loss. Caring meant opening himself up to the kind of pain he had sworn never to feel again after Sarah died. Cole crushed out his cigarette and went inside. Tomorrow he would focus on the work, on the cattle, on the 1,000 things that needed doing on a working ranch. Tomorrow he would rebuild the walls Lena's presence had started to crack. But tonight, in the darkness of his bedroom, Cole allowed himself one small admission. It was nice having someone to protect again. It was nice having a reason to come home. Even if he could never let himself want more than that. The days stretched into weeks, and Lena began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have a life here. The work fell into comfortable patterns. Mornings in the kitchen with Mrs. Avery, afternoons in the garden or mending clothes on the porch, evenings helping prepare supper for the ranch hands. The rhythm of it soothed something broken inside her, gave her bruised soul time to heal. Sheriff Matthews had come back twice more, first to tell them that several witnesses had corroborated Lena's story about the attempted sale to Crenshaw, then to inform them that Burke had been warned in no uncertain terms to stay away from the Warwick Ranch and from Lena herself. The news should have brought relief, but Lena could not shake the feeling that Burke was not the type to accept defeat quietly. Cole seemed to share her unease. He had taken to checking on her cabin every night before bed, making sure the door was secure, ensuring she had everything she needed. He never lingered. never said more than a few words. But his presence had become something Lena looked forward to with an intensity that both comforted and frightened her. Because somewhere between the quiet breakfast and the stolen glances across the dinner table, Lena had done something incredibly foolish. She had started to fall for him. It happened in small moments, the way he had left a book of poetry on her cabin doorstep one morning, remembering she had mentioned loving to read, the coat he draped over her shoulders one cool evening when they had both been on the porch watching the sunset, the time she had cut her hand slicing vegetables and he had bandaged it himself, his touch so gentle it made her chest ache, the way he listened when she spoke, really listened, as if her words mattered, as if she mattered. Mrs. Avery noticed, of course. The older woman saw everything. "You are good for him," she said one afternoon as they worked together preserving peaches. "I have not seen him smile this much in 3 years. Have not seen him take an interest in anything beyond cattle and fence posts since Sarah passed." Lena's hand stilled on the peach she was peeling. "I am just grateful for the work, Mrs. Avery, for the safety. I am not, we are not." "Hush now, child. I have got eyes in my head." Mrs. Avery's smile was knowing but kind. "And I am not saying there is anything improper going on. Cole is too much of a gentleman for that. But feelings do not wait for permission or proper timing. They just are. He loved his wife," Lena said quietly. "He still loves her. Of course he does. Sarah was a good woman, and Cole is not the type to forget. But loving someone you have lost does not mean you cannot love again." Mrs. Avery set down her paring knife and looked at Lena directly. "Sarah would want him to be happy. She would want him to have someone to share his life with. And she would have liked you, Lena." Before Lena could respond, Tommy came running into the yard, his face flushed and alarmed. "Mrs. Avery, Miss Hart, we have got trouble." Lena's stomach dropped. "What kind of trouble?" "Rustlers hit the north pasture last night. Cole and Jack are up there now counting the losses. But it looks bad. Real bad." The word spread through the ranch like wildfire. By the time Lena and Mrs. Avery made it to the barn, Raphael was already saddling fresh horses, and Tommy was loading rifles. Cole and Jack rode in minutes later, both men grim-faced and dust-covered. 15 head, Cole said, swinging down from his horse. "Maybe more. Professional job. They knew what they were doing, cut the fence clean and moved the cattle out without spooking the rest of the herd." "Burke Russell," Jack said, spitting into the dirt. "Got to be. Who else would have the nerve to hit us right after what happened in town?" Cole's jaw tightened. "We do not know that for sure. The hell we do not." Jack was older than the other hands, maybe 50, with weathered skin and eyes that had seen too much. "Everyone in town knows you embarrassed Crenshaw and stood up to Burke on the girl's account. This is payback. Plain and simple." Lena felt the weight of their stares shift toward her, felt the unspoken accusation hanging in the air. This was her fault. Burke was targeting Cole because of her, costing him money and cattle and peace, all because Cole had been foolish enough to protect her. "I should go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I should leave before he does worse." "The hell you will." Cole's voice cracked like a whip. He turned to Lena, and the fury in his eyes made her take a step back. "You are not going anywhere. This is not your fault, Lena. Burke Russell is a thief and a coward, and if he thinks he can run you off my land by stealing my cattle, he has got another thing coming." But Cole? No, the single word carried such finality that Lena's protest died in her throat. "We deal with rustlers the same way we would deal with them if you were not here. We set guards, we patrol the property lines, and we make it clear that anyone who touches Warwick cattle will answer for it. That is all." Jack nodded slowly. "I will take first watch tonight. Raphael can take over at midnight. Tommy, you are on dawn patrol." "What about me?" Lena surprised herself by asking. "I can shoot. My father taught me before he died." "If you need extra eyes—" "Absolutely not," Cole said immediately. "It is too dangerous. Everything is too dangerous." Lena shot back, finding her courage. "Living is dangerous, but I am not going to hide in my cabin while you risk your lives cleaning up a mess that is partially my fault. I can help, Cole. Let me help." They stared at each other across the dusty yard, and Lena saw the war playing out behind Cole's eyes. his instinct to protect her battling against his respect for her autonomy. Finally, he looked away. Fine, but you stay with Mrs. Avery in the main house, and you do not go outside after dark unless I am with you. And if there is trouble, real trouble, you lock yourself in the root cellar and do not come out until someone you trust comes to get you. Those are my conditions. It was not perfect, but it was something. Lena nodded. Agreed. That night, the ranch felt different. Tension hung in the air like the promise of a storm. Everyone moved with heightened awareness. Cole barely touched his supper, his attention divided between the windows and the darkness beyond. After the meal, while Lena was washing dishes, she heard raised voices from the porch. She moved closer to the door, not quite eavesdropping, but not quite ignoring it either. Need to think about your position here, Jack was saying. I am not saying the girl is not worth protecting. But 15 head is a lot of money, Cole. If Burke keeps this up, you could lose everything you have built. So what are you suggesting? Cole's voice was dangerously quiet. That I turn her out? Send her back to the man who beat her? I am suggesting you consider all your options. Maybe find her work somewhere else, somewhere Burke does not have reach. Get her out of the territory entirely. She stays. No hesitation, no doubt. End of discussion. There was a long pause. Then Jack sighed heavily. You are falling for her. Lena's breath caught in her throat. That is none of your concern, Cole said. The hell it is not. I have worked for you 5 years, watched you grieve Sarah, watched you lock yourself away from the world. And now this girl shows up and suddenly you are getting into fistfights in town and making enemies of powerful men and what? And feeling something again. Remembering what it is like to care about someone. You think that is a bad thing? I think it is dangerous, Jack said bluntly, for you and for her. Men like Burke Russell do not play by rules. They play dirty, and they play for keeps. If he figures out you care about that girl, he will not stop at stealing cattle. The words sent ice through Lena's veins. Because she knew Jack was right. She had seen the vindictiveness in Burke's eyes, the pleasure he took in other people's suffering. If he realized Cole's feelings went deeper than simple protection, let him come, Cole said, and there was steel in his voice now. Let him try whatever he wants to treat. He will find out what happens to men who threaten what is mine. What is mine? The possessiveness in those words should have frightened Lena, should have reminded her of all the times men had treated her like property. But coming from Cole, it felt different. It felt like a promise, like shelter, like safety. It felt like something she desperately wanted, but did not dare name. 2 nights later, Lena woke to the smell of smoke. She bolted upright in bed, her heart hammering. Through the window, she could see an orange glow coming from outside. She threw on a dress and ran to the door, threw it open, and her world collapsed. Her cabin was not on fire, but the small structure next to the barn, the one where hay was stored, was completely engulfed in flames. No, that was not right either. The flames were coming from the opposite direction, from where her cabin would have been visible from the main house. Someone was running toward her. Cole, his face pale with fear in the firelight. Lena, thank God. Thank God you are all right. What happened? Cole's jaw was tight. Someone set fire to the cabin. Your cabin. The one you were supposed to be sleeping in. But Lena looked back at the small structure she had run from. I moved to the guest room in the main house. Mrs. Avery said, I know. Cole's voice was rough. Mrs. Avery told me, but Burke did not know that. He thought you were still in the cabin. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Burke had tried to burn her alive. The ranch hands managed to contain the fire, but the cabin was completely destroyed. Nothing left but smoking ruins and blackened earth. In the ashes, they found a note nailed to what remained of the doorframe. The words were crude. The message was clear. Bring the girl back, or the next fire will not be so small. Lena stood staring at the charred remains of her sanctuary, the place where she had felt safe for the first time in years. Tears streamed down her face. Everything she had was in there. The few possessions she had managed to keep, the dresses Sarah had given her, the book of poetry Cole had left on her doorstep. All of it gone. You will stay in the main house permanently, Cole said firmly, appearing at her side. The guest room is yours for as long as you need it. We will get you new clothes. New things. Everything can be replaced, but not safety, not peace. Burke had shattered that just as thoroughly as he had burned her cabin. That evening, after the ranch hands had been fed and sent to guard the property, Cole stood in the parlor and looked at Lena with an expression she could not quite read. "There is another option," he said quietly. "One that would make this all simpler." Lena's breath caught. What option? Cole seemed to gather himself. When he spoke again, his words came out carefully measured. "We could get married, a real marriage, legal and binding. It would protect you from Burke. A married woman cannot be forced back to her stepfather. It would stop the gossip, and it would make it clear to everyone that you are under my protection permanently." The words hung in the air. "A marriage of convenience," Lena said flatly. "That is what you are proposing. I am proposing a solution that keeps you safe. You said we would take things slow," Lena whispered. "And now, because Burke burned down a cabin, you want to rush into marriage? I will not marry you out of fear," she said, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. "I will not marry anyone out of fear. Not after spending 3 years living in terror of Burke. If I marry you, Cole Warwick, it will be because we both want it, because we choose each other for the right reasons, not because some vindictive man burned down my cabin." Cole stared at her for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, the corner of his mouth twitched upward. "You are right. You are absolutely right. I am sorry. He broke off, shaking his head. "I do not know what I would do if something happened to you. The thought of Burke getting his hands on you again, nothing is going to happen to me," Lena said with more confidence than she felt. "We will figure this out together." But that night, lying in the guest room, Lena could not shake the fear that had taken up residence in her chest. Burke had found a way to reach her, even here. And if he could burn her cabin, what else might he do? The answer came 2 nights later. Lena woke to the sound of gunfire. She bolted upright in bed, her heart hammering. She heard Cole's voice from somewhere downstairs shouting orders. More gunshots, closer this time, and the sound of men yelling. Lena grabbed the rifle Cole had insisted she keep by her bed and ran to the window. In the moonlight, she could see dark figures moving near the barn. 3 of them, maybe 4. One was trying to light something. With a sickening lurch, Lena realized it was a torch. They were going to burn the barn. She did not think. She just acted. Lena threw open the window, raised the rifle to her shoulder the way her father had taught her, and fired a warning shot into the air. The sharp crack split the night. The dark figures scattered, shouting. She fired again, this time aiming near the man with the torch. He dropped it and ran. Cole appeared beside her suddenly, his own rifle in hand, breathing hard. "What the hell are you doing? I told you to stay in your room." "They were going to burn the barn," Lena said, and was surprised to find her hands were not shaking. "I could not just let them." Cole looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted. Not anger, not fear, but something that looked almost like pride. "Did you hit any of them?" "No, just scared them off. Good shooting." He leaned out the window, scanning the darkness. "They are gone for now, but they will be back. Burke is not going to stop until—" He broke off, but Lena knew what he had been about to say. Burke would not stop until he got what he wanted, or until someone stopped him permanently. The rest of the night passed in tense wakefulness, everyone on edge, waiting for another attack that did not come. By morning, they found more evidence of Burke's handiwork. The torch, boot prints in the dirt, and worst of all, a dead calf in the north pasture with its throat cut. A warning. Cole called everyone together in the kitchen at dawn. His face was haggard, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "This ends now. I'm going into town today to talk to the sheriff. Burke Russell has crossed too many lines. It is time he answered for it." "And if the sheriff will not do anything?" Jack asked. Cole's expression hardened. "Then I will handle it myself. One way or another, Lena will not spend another night in fear." But before Cole could leave for town, Mrs. Avery took him aside. Lena overheard their whispered conversation from the hallway. "You know what you have to do, do you not?" Mrs. Avery said quietly. "I know what I want to do," Cole replied. "But it is not that simple, is it not? You love that girl, Cole. I can see it every time you look at her. And she loves you. though she is too scared to say it. Stop overthinking this. She deserves better than a hasty proposal driven by fear and violence. She deserves you, Mrs. Avery said firmly, and you deserve happiness. Sarah would want that for you. She would want you to move forward, to love again, to build a life with someone who makes you feel alive. There was a long silence. Then Cole said so softly Lena almost did not hear it. What if I fail her the way I failed Sarah? You did not fail Sarah. Fever took her, and there was not a damn thing you or anyone else could have done about it. That was not your fault. Mrs. Avery's voice gentled, but letting fear stop you from living, that is a choice, and I think you are brave enough to make the right one. Lena slipped away before they could discover her eavesdropping, her mind spinning. Cole blamed himself for Sarah's death. That explained so much. His fierce protectiveness, his careful distance, his terror at caring for someone again. He was afraid of losing another person he loved. But Lena was not Sarah. She was not dying of fever. She was here, alive, capable of fighting alongside him. And maybe that made all the difference. That evening, after Cole returned from town with the grim news that the sheriff had promised to look into Burke's activities, but had taken no immediate action, Lena found Cole standing alone on the porch, staring out at the darkening prairie. She approached quietly, and when she stood beside him, he did not look at her, just kept his eyes fixed on the horizon. I am sorry, he said finally. I promised I would keep you safe, and instead you are in more danger than ever. Burke will not stop. The sheriff will not help. And his voice cracked. I do not know how to fix this. Then stop trying to fix it alone, Lena said. She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his, and felt him grip her tightly, as if she were a lifeline in a storm. We face this together, Cole. You and me. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Cole finally turned to look at her, and the raw emotion in his eyes took her breath away. I cannot lose you, he whispered. I know we have only known each other a few weeks, and I know this is crazy, but Lena, I cannot lose you. The thought of Burke hurting you, of anything happening to you. Then ask me again. Lena interrupted softly. Ask me what you asked before, but this time ask for the right reasons. Cole went very still. Lena, ask me, she repeated, squeezing his hand. Not because it is practical, not because it will stop gossip, not because you think it is your duty. Ask me because you want to, because you care about me the way I care about you, because despite everything we have both been through, we still believe in the possibility of something good. For a long moment, Cole did not move. Then slowly, deliberately, he sank to one knee on the weathered porch boards, still holding her hand, looking up at her with those storm-gray eyes that had become so dear to her. Lena Hart, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I am asking you not because it is practical, though it is. Not because it will protect you, though I hope it will. I am asking because when I look at you, I see strength and courage and hope. I see someone who makes me want to be better, who makes this lonely ranch feel like home again. I see someone I could love for the rest of my life, if you will let me. He paused, then added quietly, will you marry me? Not out of fear or convenience, but because we choose each other. Tears spilled down Lena's cheeks, but for once they were good tears, happy tears. Yes, she whispered, yes, Cole, I will marry you. He stood and pulled her into his arms, and Lena went willingly, pressing her face against his chest, feeling his heart pounding beneath her cheek. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other as the sun set and the stars came out. Two broken people who had found in each other the possibility of being whole again. Behind them, unnoticed by either, Mrs. Avery watched from the kitchen window and smiled through her own tears. But their moment of peace was shattered by the sound of approaching horses, and a voice that made Lena's blood run cold. Well, well, Burke Russell drawled from the darkness beyond the porch. Ain't this touching? Cole moved so fast, Lena barely registered it. One moment she was in his arms. The next she was behind him, his body a shield between her and whatever was coming from the darkness. His hand went to his revolver. She heard the metallic click as he thumbed back the hammer. You are trespassing, Russell, Cole said, his voice deadly calm. Turn around and ride out while you still can. Burke stepped into the pool of light spilling from the house. Lena's breath caught. He looked worse than she had ever seen him. Clothes rumpled and stained, face flushed with liquor, eyes wild and unfocused. But it was the gun in his hand that made her stomach drop. The barrel wavered unsteadily as he pointed it in their general direction. Trespassing? Burke laughed. That is rich coming from the man who stole my property. That girl belongs to me, Warwick. Her mama put her in my care, and I have got legal rights. You have got nothing, Cole said flatly. Lena is of age, and she has made her choice. The sheriff knows about the beatings, the attempted sale to Crenshaw, the cattle rustling, the fires. Keep pushing and you will end up in a cell. Or worse. The sheriff ain't here now, though. Is he? Burke took another step forward, and Lena could see two more figures behind him, men she did not recognize. Hired guns, probably, each armed and looking dangerous. And I am done playing nice. Burke continued. I gave you a warning with that cabin. Should have been clear enough. But you just cannot help yourself. Can you? Got to play the hero. Got to steal what is mine. I am not yours, Lena said, her voice shaking but clear. She stepped out from behind Cole despite his immediate attempt to push her back. I was never yours, Burke. You were supposed to take care of me after Mama died. But all you did was hurt me and use me and make me wish I was dead too. That is over now. Burke's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little witch. 3 years I fed you, housed you, put up with your worthless presence. And this is how you repay me? Running off with the first man who shows you attention like some common... Watch your mouth, Cole growled, but Burke was beyond listening now, beyond reason. I am going to make you an offer, Warwick, Burke said, his gun hand steadying slightly. One last chance. Give me the girl and $500 for my trouble, and we will call it square. You can go back to your lonely ranch, and I will disappear. Nobody has to die tonight. Go to hell, Cole said without hesitation. Burke's expression darkened further. Wrong answer. He raised the gun, pointing it directly at Cole's chest, and Lena felt time slow down, felt her heart stop beating, felt the world narrow to that single moment of terrible clarity. Burke, do not, she screamed, but her voice seemed to come from far away. Burke's finger tightened on the trigger, and then a shot rang out, but not from Burke's gun. One of the men behind Burke, the taller of the two, had drawn his own weapon and fired into the air. That is enough, Russell. I did not sign on for murder. Burke whirled on him, furious. What the hell are you doing, Henderson? What you should be doing, walking away before this goes too far. The man, Henderson, kept his gun raised but pointed at the ground. You hired us to scare them, maybe rough them up a little. You did not say nothing about killing decent folks in cold blood. That ain't happening. Not for any amount of money. You coward. Burke spat. I will kill you myself. He swung his gun toward Henderson. And everything happened at once. Henderson fired, his bullet catching Burke in the shoulder and spinning him around. Burke's own gun discharged, the bullet going wide and shattering a window in the house behind them. Cole's revolver cleared leather, and Lena heard herself screaming. Then Burke was on his knees in the dirt, blood spreading across his shirt, his face pale with shock and pain. Jesus Christ, the other hired gun muttered, and both men immediately holstered their weapons and raised their hands. We are done here. We want no part of this. Cole kept his gun trained on them until they had back to their horses and ridden off into the darkness. Only then did he move forward cautiously, keeping his weapon ready, while Lena stood frozen on the porch, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. Mrs. Avery burst out of the house, took one look at the scene, and immediately took charge. Tommy, Jack, get out here. She turned to Lena. Child, are you hurt? Lena shook her head mutely, unable to find words. Burke groaned, pressing his hand to his wounded shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. Lena, he gasped. Lena, help me, please. I am dying. Cole moved to stand over him, his expression hard. You are not dying. Bullet went clean through your shoulder. Missed anything vital. You will live. Though whether that is a blessing or a curse is debatable. We need to get him inside, Mrs. Avery said. All business despite the chaos. Cannot leave him to bleed out in the yard, much as he might deserve it. Christian thing is to patch him up and hand him over to the sheriff in the morning. Mrs. Avery, Cole started to protest. Do not argue with me, Cole Warwick. I will not have a man's death on my conscience, no matter how vile he is. She fixed him with a look that brooked no argument. Besides, this way he answers for what he has done through the law. Is that not what you wanted? Cole's jaw worked, but he nodded. Fine. Jack, Tommy, help me get him inside. Put him in the downstairs guest room and lock the door. Raphael, ride into town and fetch the sheriff and the doctor. Tell them what happened. The ranch hands appeared and set about their tasks with grim efficiency. Burke groaned and cursed as they hauled him into the house, his threats fading to whimpers as the pain set in. Lena watched it all from the porch, her arms wrapped around herself, shaking despite the warm night air. When the chaos finally subsided and Burke was locked in the guest room with Mrs. Avery tending his wound, Cole came back to find Lena still standing in the same spot, staring at nothing. Lena, he touched her arm gently. Come inside. It is over. Is it? She whispered. It does not feel over. It feels like I am waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Burke to break out of that room, or for more men to come, or... Hey, Cole turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. Look at me. You are safe. Burke is not going anywhere, and even if he tried, he would have to go through me first. And that is not happening. Lena looked up into his gray eyes and saw the truth there, the fierce protectiveness, the unwavering resolve, the love he had admitted to feeling. Something inside her finally broke, and she collapsed against him, sobbing into his chest as the terror of the past weeks came pouring out. Cole held her through it all, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring quiet reassurances she barely heard but felt in her bones. When the storm finally passed, Lena pulled back, embarrassed by her breakdown. I am sorry, I should not have... Do not apologize for being human, Cole said gently. You have been carrying this weight for weeks. It is about time you let some of it go. The sheriff arrived 2 hours later with Dr. Harrison, an elderly man who had been practicing medicine in Copper Ridge since before Lena was born. While the doctor tended to Burke, Sheriff Matthews questioned everyone about what had happened. Henderson and his partner came by my office before they left town. Matthews said finally, confirmed everything you have told me. Said Russell hired them to harass you folks. Paid them $50 each to burn the cabin and kill some cattle. Promised more if they would help him snatch Miss Hart back. He shook his head. Damn fool. All this over wounded pride. What happens now? Cole asked. Now Burke Russell goes to jail to await trial, assuming he survives his injury. Doc says he will pull through. More is the pity. He will likely hang for attempted murder, rustling, and arson. Matthews looked at Lena with something like sympathy. I am sorry, Miss Hart. I should have taken your complaints more seriously from the start. Maybe if I had, none of this would have happened. Maybe, Lena said quietly. Or maybe Burke would have found some other way. Men like him always do. Dr. Harrison emerged from the guest room, wiping his hands on a cloth. He will live, though he will have a useless shoulder for the rest of his days. Bullet did more damage than I initially thought. He is awake and lucid now. If you want to talk to him, Sheriff. Matthews nodded and disappeared into the guest room. Through the partially open door, Lena could hear the low murmur of voices, the sheriff's questions, and Burke's weak responses. She turned away, unable to listen, unable to care what excuses Burke might offer. Cole came to stand beside her at the window, both of them looking out at the darkness beyond. You all right? He asked softly. I do not know, Lena admitted. I should be relieved, happy even. Burke is finally going to pay for what he has done, but I just feel empty, tired. That is normal, Mrs. Avery said from her seat at the table. You have been running on fear and determination for so long. Now that the danger has passed, your body does not know what to do with it itself. Give it time, dear. The relief will come. The sheriff emerged a short time later, his expression grim. Russell has admitted to everything. The beatings, the attempted sale, hiring Henderson and his friend, the whole ugly business. He paused. Says he wants to talk to Miss Hart before we take him away. Says he has got something he needs to say to her. Lena's first instinct was to refuse, to never willingly be in the same room as Burke Russell again. But Cole touched her arm gently and said, It is your choice. You do not owe him anything. But if there is something you need to say to him, something you need to hear, this might be your only chance. Lena thought about it for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I will see him, but I want you there with me, Cole. I do not want to face him alone. I am not going anywhere, Cole promised. They entered the guest room together. Burke looked even worse than before, pale and sweating, his face drawn with pain, his shoulder heavily bandaged. He was handcuffed to the bed frame, the sheriff clearly taking no chances. And he seemed smaller somehow, less threatening in his weakness. Lena, he said when he saw her, and his voice cracked. I am sorry. I know that does not mean nothing now, but I am sorry for everything. Lena crossed her arms, keeping her distance. Why now? Why are you sorry now when you were not sorry for the past 3 years? Because I am dying, Burke said bluntly. Doc says the shoulder will heal, but I can feel it. Something is wrong inside. Behind what the bullet did. I can feel death coming for me. And I cannot go to my grave without saying this. Dr. Harrison, standing in the corner, started to protest, but Burke waved him off weakly. Let me talk. Please. He turned his focus back to Lena. I loved your mama. Loved her more than anything. When she died, something broke inside me. I blamed everyone. God, the world, myself. But mostly I blamed you. The words hit Lena like a physical blow. Me? What did I do? You look just like her, Burke said, and tears started rolling down his weathered cheeks. Every time I looked at you, I saw Catherine, saw everything I had lost, and I took out my grief on you, made you suffer because I was suffering. It was not right, it was not fair, but I did it anyway, and I cannot take it back. Lena felt her own eyes burning with tears she refused to shed. You are right, you cannot take it back. You cannot give me back those 3 years of fear and pain. You cannot undo the damage you did. I know. Burke's voice was barely a whisper now. But I can tell you this, your mama. She would have been so proud of you. The way you stood up to me. The way you fought for your own life. Your own happiness. That took courage. Real courage. And I am sorry I tried to break that spirit in you. I am sorry I was not the man Catherine believed I could be. The room fell silent, except for the ticking of a clock, and Burke's labored breathing. Lena stood there, years of anger and fear warring with this unexpected apology. This glimpse of the man Burke might have been if grief had not twisted him into something monstrous. I do not forgive you, she said finally, and her voice was steady. I cannot. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I hope you find peace, whatever happens next. Whatever judgment waits for you. I hope you find peace. Burke nodded weakly. That is more than I deserve. Thank you. His eyes drifted to Cole. Take care of her work. She deserves better than I gave her. Better than most of this world will give her. You seem like a decent man. Do not prove me wrong. I will not, Cole said quietly. They left the room then, and Lena did not look back. Sheriff Matthews and his deputies collected Burke shortly after, loading him carefully into a wagon for the journey back to town. Burke was unconscious again by then. His brief surge of lucidity faded. As Lena watched the wagon roll away into the pre-dawn darkness, she felt something shift inside her chest. Not quite closure, not quite peace, but something close. An ending, at least. A final page turned on the darkest chapter of her life. The sun was rising by the time everyone finally settled. The ranch hands went to catch a few hours of sleep. Mrs. Avery retired to her room, and Lena and Cole found themselves alone in the kitchen, drinking the last of the coffee, watching the light change from gray to gold through the eastern windows. Hell of a night, Cole said finally. Lena laughed, the sound surprising them both. That is one way to put it. She set down her coffee cup and turned to face him. Cole, what you asked me earlier. On the porch, before Burke arrived. Did you mean it? Every word, Cole said without hesitation. I want to marry you, Lena. Not because it is practical or protective, but because I love you. I think I have loved you since the night I found you in that alley. If I'm being honest, maybe even before that, when I saw you fighting off Crenshaw at the saloon and knew you were someone special. The words warmed Lena from the inside out, melting the last of the ice that had formed around her heart during the long, terrible night. I love you too, she whispered. I was afraid to admit it. afraid of what it meant. But I do. You saved my life in every way a person can be saved, Cole Warwick. And I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Cole reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Then let us do this right. No more waiting, no more fear. Tomorrow we will ride into town and get married properly, with a preacher and witnesses and everything. What do you say? I say yes, Lena replied, smiling through her tears. I say yes and yes and yes. They sat there as the sun climbed higher, hands clasped across the scarred wooden table. Two people who had found each other in the darkest of circumstances and chosen light instead of darkness, hope instead of despair, love instead of fear. The next morning, true to his word, Cole arranged for them to travel into Copper Ridge. Mrs. Avery fussed over Lena's appearance, lending her a dress that had belonged to Sarah, a simple blue cotton with white lace at the collar that fit perfectly. Sarah would have wanted you to wear this, Mrs. Avery said, adjusting the lace with gentle hands. She believed in second chances, in love finding a way even through grief. You are giving Cole his second chance, Lena, and he is giving you yours. They rode to town with Tommy and Jack as witnesses, the morning bright and clear and full of promise. News of the previous night's events had apparently spread through Copper Ridge like wildfire, because when they arrived at the small church at the edge of town, there was already a crowd gathered. Reverend Walsh, a kind-faced man in his 60s, greeted them at the church door. Mr. Warwick, Miss Hart, I heard about your troubles. I am glad you both came through it safely. He glanced at the crowd. Shall we go inside and make this official? The church was simple and small, with rough wooden pews and plain glass windows that let in streams of golden morning light. Lena stood beside Cole at the altar, her hand trembling in his, and listened as Reverend Walsh began the familiar words. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. But before he could continue, the church doors burst open. Malcolm Crenshaw strode in with two men flanking him, his face still bearing the marks of Cole's fists from weeks earlier. I object, Crenshaw announced loudly. This woman was promised to me. Burke Russell accepted my money and I demand. You demand nothing, Sheriff Matthews said, appearing from the back of the church. Burke Russell is in a jail cell awaiting trial, and any deals he made on Miss Hart's behalf are void. She is of legal age and free to marry whoever she chooses. Now you can stay for the ceremony if you can behave yourself, or you can leave. Your choice. Crenshaw's face flushed dark red. The law in this territory is a joke. This is a farce. That woman is a... He never finished the sentence. Cole released Lena's hand and started toward Crenshaw, his expression murderous. But it was Lena herself who spoke, her voice ringing through the small church with surprising strength. I am a woman who survived 3 years of abuse and came out the other side still believing in goodness. I am a woman who found courage I did not know I had and chose hope over hatred. And I am a woman about to marry a man who sees me as a partner, not property. She met Crenshaw's eyes directly. You will never own me. Burke will never control me again. And I will not spend one more second of my life afraid of men like you. The church fell absolutely silent. Then from somewhere in the gathered crowd, someone started clapping. The applause spread, growing louder, until even some of the people who had come hoping for scandal were applauding Lena's words. Crenshaw stood there, humiliated and furious, until his men pulled him back toward the door. This is not over, he snarled at Cole. Yes, Cole said quietly, it is. After Crenshaw left, Reverend Walsh cleared his throat and smiled. Well then, shall we continue? The ceremony proceeded without further interruption. Lena barely heard the words, lost in the surreal beauty of the moment, standing in a church filled with strangers who were applauding her bravery, beside a man who had risked everything to protect her, promising to love and honor him for the rest of her life. When Reverend Walsh finally said, You may kiss your bride, Cole cupped Lena's face gently in his calloused hands and kissed her with a tenderness that stole her breath. I love you, he whispered against her lips. My brave, beautiful wife. I love you too, Lena replied. My protector, my partner, my home. They walked out of the church into brilliant sunshine, hand in hand, Mr. and Mrs. Cole Warwick at last. Mrs. Avery was waiting with tears in her eyes and a basket of rice to throw. Tommy and Jack were grinning like fools, and even some of the townspeople who had gathered out of curiosity offered congratulations. But as they were preparing to leave, a young deputy came running up to the sheriff, his face pale. Matthews listened to whatever news the deputy brought, then approached Cole and Lena with a solemn expression. I am sorry to tell you this on your wedding day, but Burke Russell died about an hour ago. Doctor said he went peaceful in his sleep. Whatever was damaged inside gave out. Lena felt Cole's arm tighten around her waist, supporting her even as the news hit. Burke was dead, the man who had tormented her, who had tried to destroy her, who had apologized with what might have been genuine remorse in his final hours. Gone. How do you feel? Cole asked her softly. Lena thought about it, searching her heart for what she felt. Grief, relief, anger. In the end, she found only a deep, weary sadness for wasted lives and wasted years, for the man Burke could have been and never was. I feel free, she said finally, and sad, and grateful that he at least tried to make peace before the end. She looked up at Cole. Is that wrong? No, Cole said, kissing her forehead. That is grace. That is you being the better person, even when you have every right not to be. They buried Burke Russell 2 days later in the cemetery on the hill overlooking Copper Ridge. Lena stood beside Cole at the graveside, her hand in his, and said a silent prayer for the stepfather who had failed her, but who had also, in his last moments, given her the closure she needed. She forgave him then, truly forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because she deserved to be free of the anger and pain. Mrs. Avery had arranged for a small reception at the ranch after the ceremony. And by the time they returned home, there were neighbors gathered with food and well wishes. The house that had been so quiet and empty when Lena first arrived was filled with laughter and music and life. That evening, after the guests had finally departed and the ranch had settled into comfortable quiet, Cole took Lena's hand and led her upstairs to the room that was now theirs, no longer his alone, no longer marked by grief and loss, but ready to be filled with new memories and new love. Are you sure? He asked at the threshold, giving her one last chance to change her mind, to ask for more time. But Lena was done being afraid. She was done letting the past dictate her future. She stepped into the room and pulled her husband inside, closing the door on everything that had come before, and opening herself to everything that could be. In the darkness, with Cole's arms around her, Lena finally understood what it meant to be safe, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, to be treasured instead of tolerated, to be loved instead of used, to be seen as a whole person instead of a burden or a commodity. Cole made love to her with a gentleness that brought tears to her eyes, taking his time, murmuring reassurances, making absolutely certain she felt cherished with every touch. And when it was over and they lay tangled together in the sheets, Lena felt something she had never felt before in her life. Complete. Thank you, she whispered into the darkness. For what? Cole's fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. For being the man who stepped forward when everyone else looked away. For being the cowboy who promised I would only be touched over your grave. For keeping that promise even when it cost you. She lifted her head to look at him. For loving me when I did not think I could be loved anymore. Cole pulled her closer, and Lena felt his heart beating steady and strong against her cheek. You are easy to love, Lena Warwick. Easiest thing I have ever done. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other. And for the first time in 3 years, Lena slept without nightmares, without fear, without the crushing weight of despair. She slept like a woman who had finally come home. The months that followed settled into a new rhythm, different from before, but comfortable in its own way. Lena was no longer just the housekeeper helping Mrs. Avery. She was the lady of the house, Cole's wife, a partner in running the ranch. She learned to manage the household accounts, to plan meals for the men during busy seasons, to handle the 100 small decisions that kept a working ranch functioning smoothly. But she also learned to ride better, spending mornings in the saddle beside Cole as he checked fences and counted cattle. And slowly the ranch itself began to change. Lena planted flowers around the porch, bringing color and beauty to the weathered wood. She hung curtains in the windows, placed paintings on the walls, not erasing the past, but honoring it while making room for the present. Malcolm Crenshaw left town in September. Some said to avoid the shame of having been publicly humiliated twice by the same rancher. Either way, his going lifted a shadow Lena had not fully realized was there. The town itself slowly warmed to her presence. Mrs. Henderson from the general store started greeting her warmly. Reverend Walsh's wife invited her to join the church ladies' sewing circle. "You are making quite an impression," Cole said one afternoon as they rode back from town. "Mrs. Henderson told me you have been helping her daughter with reading lessons." Lena shrugged, embarrassed. "Sarah cannot read well and her mother is too busy to teach her. It is not much. Just an hour a week. It is everything to that girl," Cole said. And to her mother, "You are building a life here, Lena, not just with me, but with this whole community. I am proud of you." The words made Lena's heart swell. "I am just doing what anyone would do." "No," Cole said firmly, "you are doing what the best kind of person would do. After everything you survived, you could have closed yourself off, become bitter and hard. Instead, you chose kindness. That takes real strength." As autumn deepened and the leaves turned gold and crimson, Lena realized she was truly deeply happy for the first time in her adult life. The fear that had been her constant companion for 3 years had faded to a distant memory. She slept through the night without nightmares. She laughed easily and often. She looked forward to each day instead of dreading it, and she began to hope for things she had never dared to hope for before. It was mid-October when Lena first suspected she might be pregnant. She had missed her monthly courses and felt queasy in the mornings, but she told herself it was probably nothing. But when another week passed and the nausea persisted, she rode into town to see Dr. Harrison. The old doctor examined her carefully, asked her questions, and then smiled. "Congratulations, Mrs. Warwick. I would say you are about 8 weeks along. Baby should arrive sometime in late May or early June." Lena sat stunned in the examination room. Her hand pressed to her still flat stomach. A baby. She was going to have a baby. Cole's baby. A child born not from fear or violence, but from love and hope, and the future they were building together. "Is everything all right?" Dr. Harrison asked, concerned by her silence. "Yes," Lena breathed, and started to cry. Happy tears this time. "Yes, everything is perfect. I just never thought I could have this. A real family? A child? I never let myself imagine it." "Well, you can imagine it now," the doctor said kindly. Lena paid the doctor and rode home in a daze, her heart so full she thought it might burst. Cole was working near the barn when she returned. He looked up when he heard her horse and waved, then frowned slightly when he saw her expression. "Everything okay? You look like you have seen a ghost." Lena dismounted and walked toward him. And she must have been smiling because his frown deepened into confusion. "Lena, what is going on?" She took his hands and placed them on her stomach, covering them with her own. "I am pregnant, Cole. We are going to have a baby." For a long moment, Cole did not move. Then slowly his face transformed, the careful control he usually maintained crumbling to reveal pure, unfiltered joy. "A baby," he whispered. "We are having a baby." "In late May or early June," Lena confirmed, laughing and crying at the same time. "Are you happy? I know we have not talked about it, and maybe it is too soon, but—" Cole kissed her, cutting off her worried words with his lips. When he pulled back, there were tears in his eyes too. "Happy does not begin to cover it. Lena, you have given me everything. A reason to wake up in the morning. A home instead of just a house. And now this, a child. Our child." He dropped to his knees in the dirt and pressed his ear to her stomach, as if he could already hear the tiny heartbeat growing inside. Lena ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed by the tenderness of the gesture. "I am going to be a father," Cole said, his voice muffled against her dress. "I am going to have a chance to do it right this time, to protect and love and be there for every moment." He looked up at her. "I will not fail this child. You did not fail Sarah," Lena said firmly, "and you will not fail our child. You will be an amazing father, Cole. I know it." The baby came on a warm evening in late May, just as the sun was setting. The labor was long and difficult. Dr. Harrison arrived near midnight. Mrs. Avery stayed close, wiping Lena's forehead with cool cloths. and Cole refused to leave her side. Dawn was breaking when the baby finally came, emerging into the world with a lusty cry that made Lena sob with relief. Dr. Harrison cleaned and examined the infant quickly, then placed the squirming bundle in Lena's arms. "Congratulations," he said, smiling. "You have a healthy baby girl." Lena looked down at her daughter, their daughter, and felt her heart expand in ways she had never imagined possible. The baby had a crown of dark hair and eyes that would probably turn gray like her father's, and tiny, perfect fingers that immediately wrapped around Lena's thumb with surprising strength. "She is beautiful," Lena whispered. "Cole, look. She is perfect." Cole, who had been frozen in place since the moment of birth, finally moved. He sat on the edge of the bed and reached out with one tentative finger to stroke the baby's soft cheek. His hand was shaking, and tears were streaming down his face. "She is perfect," he agreed. "She is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." After her mother, they named her Catherine Sarah Warwick. Catherine for Lena's mother, Sarah for Cole's first wife, two women who had shaped their lives and brought them to this moment. Little Catherine would grow up knowing only love and safety, who would never experience the fear and pain her mother had endured, who represented everything good that could grow from even the darkest soil. One evening in August, when Catherine was nearly 3 months old, Lena and Cole sat together on the porch swing. Catherine slept peacefully in Lena's arms, and the night was soft and warm, filled with the sound of crickets. "Do you remember the first night we sat out here together?" Cole asked, his arm around Lena's shoulders. "I remember," Lena said. "I was terrified and hopeful and had no idea what was going to happen next. And now?" Lena looked down at her sleeping daughter, then up at her husband. This man who had stepped into an alley and changed the entire course of her life with 4 simple words. "That's far enough. Now I know exactly what happens next," she said softly. "We live. We love. We raise our daughter and maybe give her siblings someday. We build a life that honors everything we survived to get here. We choose happiness every single day." Cole kissed her temple gently. "I love you, Lena Warwick. I love you too. My protector, my partner, my home." They stayed on the porch until the night grew cool. Two people who had found each other in the darkest of circumstances and built something beautiful from the ashes. A family, a future, a love that would last the rest of their days. And somewhere in the heavens, if spirits could smile, Lena's mother Catherine and Cole's wife Sarah looked down on them and knew that finally everyone had found their peace.